Welcome, welcome, welcome. You listen to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM.
We have a birthday boy here. Happy birthday.
I'm 5 years old finally.
Well, mentally, yes. Mentally, yes.
Mature-wise, I'm about 2, but so thank you. Thank you for the extra 3 years.
Well, you've got some lovely gifts here.
Oh, absolutely.
Courtesy of everyone here at KHTS.
You'll have to share it with me because I'm not a big.
That's okay. No. You need to have that. That's for you.
That's sugar.
On your birthday. Yeah.
So I can shoot off the walls.
Let's see. What is it? What do we have?
It's a yellow vanilla frosting.
It's the like a confetti type.
Well, the birthday cake.
Yeah, with the pretty little colors in it. It's beautiful. And a nice balloon. You can actually see it on our Facebook feed right now. It's beautiful.
I was going to say, I'm glad for the play-by-play because the audio version is not getting this good of an experience.
Well, it's going to be on the podcast, obviously. That's when that's why I produce your podcast.
The audio version of the podcast, yes.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Well, happy birthday.
Well, thank you
from
guys.
all of us and Stevie Wonder.
Thanks. Does that mean I'm blind? Remember Ebony and Ivory. All right, so every week we have a show. Not every week is my birthday, but every week we do have a show. And each week we try to help people learn something about business. The goal here is at the end of the show, if you know something more about business than you did before, we've accomplished our goal, and that's what we try to do. We've been doing that for actually in January it'll be 8 years. That's how long. It's a long time. And the name of the show is called Ask Brien, Brien. And we have our resident expert, Tracy. Are you there?
I am here, yes, and I'm happy birthday to you. I'm very thrilled that it is your special day, at least within 24 hours of your special day anyway. So,
well, me and Olivia Newton-John, what can I say? Anyway.
I know. She always comes up on our show. I mean, if she only knew how much she was loved and adored. And didn't you just say you recently just watched the movie Grease again?
Maybe that's why. Yeah, it was on.
Maybe.
There wasn't no movies that I wanted to watch.
So celebrating all of the birthdays today. So, but we also are celebrating our E's because we have extraordinary E's. And speaking of extraordinary, I always like to kick it off with our first E with our engineer, Jen. Yay, Jen.
Thank you.
I don't have to do this like last week?
we had to pivot last week with some technical issues. Yeah, it was fine. It was
fun.
We have access to our official sound effects today, which is perfect.
Yes.
And then when it comes to E's, the Ask Brien radio show is all about our experts, and we are not short on experts today. We have an amazing guest that we'll be bringing on. And when we are thinking about experts, we're thinking, okay, a minimum of 10,000 hours in your specific business industry or niche. And we do a little back of the scratch math on that calculation to indicate that would take 40 hours a week, 50-ish weeks a year, and that you'd have to invest approximately, I like the ish because it's entrepreneur. So you might be doing 52, you might be doing 48, who knows? You might take a vacation, you might not. But all of that being said, no true entrepreneur and startup is actually probably working 40. They're probably working way more than 40 hours. So we're thinking you're probably going to knock this out in 3 years. But all of that to be said, it's all about the experts because they are providing such good education to shortcut all of our learning curves in ways because they've already been through it, done it, and they're helping us to prevent us from having to make the same mistakes. And I love what you said, Peter, when we kicked off, that it's like if you leave listening to this show with one tip or one nugget that moves you forward, our job is done here. So we are very focused on the experts, very focused on the education, and we try to show up for the empathy, but I can't speak for Peter on that.
What is that?
I speak for myself.
What is
empathy? On that.
I never heard of that.
Exactly. So we'll just
That's
move
another
right
E,
along
exactly,
from that.
right? Exactly.
And I I'm always showing up pretty enthusiastic, but when I asked our guest today how he was feeling, he was more enthusiastic than most anybody, I think, that I've talked to today. But how are you feeling, Peter?
Excited! Like Chris Farley and Kim Kardashian, the screamer.
And that actually isn't just because it was your birthday and you got cake. That's literally how you show up every week. And that's why our eardrums are always compromised.
Because I'm so excited to be having a new person to interview. I'm so excited to learn something new. I'm so excited for being around the engineer and the co-host. I mean, why wouldn't I be excited? I got it all.
I couldn't agree more. And that's what makes us, in honor of Olivia Newton-John and Grease, so electrifying. So with that note, take it away, Peter.
Thank you very much. All right, so we have our guest. Has our guest left and said, why am I here? I don't know who got me into this, but there's going to be hell to pay, or are you still there?
I am still here.
But are you excited, as I am?
I am absolutely ecstatic and energized about the conversation we're about to have, sir.
Woohoo! All right. So, first of all, people don't know who you are. So, first, we kind of like to have a brief summary of who you are and where you came from and how you got to where you are. So, first, give us a little background. You started a new company recently. I know a little bit about it. But before we get there, let's get the little background of where you came from and how you got there.
Yeah, you got it. So everybody knows me as Jesse, but my name is Jesus. That's the name my mama gave me. And if I don't say that, I will be in hot water because it's happened before. I began my working career in the 1900s, back in 1995, as an apprentice plumber. I spent just over 20 years on the plumbing side of the construction business with various roles. I got punished up the organizational chart, which led me to work for a large general contractor here in the States, all commercial industrial type construction. A leading change for that general contractor was technically like a change leader, change manager. Then I went to work for a national brand as their director of environmental health and safety. I was invited over there to help them with a cultural transformation. And shortly, that was about a 9 or 10 month stint. And I heard the calling to launch my consulting business about just over 2 years ago. And so I got to learn along the way, starting off as an apprentice plumber, journeyman, and different middle management roles, et cetera, and then working as a change leader for general contractors and owners, et cetera. I got to learn that we have a communication thing. And it doesn't matter what level of the organization you're in or what your education is or how much backlog you're managing. We all struggle with it. We are all more alike than we are different. And so today I get to help people boost production in the office and in the field. That's me in a nutshell.
Oh, that's no small peanut for that nutshell. Anyway, so how do you go from being in the construction and then branding? I guess I got it a little bit there, and the environmental and the safety stuff. How do you go from there to become a consultant? Because to me, it sounds like even though it's the same field and you have that background and you have all that knowledge, I mean, it's a whole brand new business. I mean, now you got to go out and get customers, find people, tell people, hey, listen, I have a lot of background. I can help you out and provide you stuff. How do you go make that transition?
So, well, that's a really great question. First, I'm a little nutty, right?
We know about the nutshell already, but yeah.
Right, exactly. And so I found out that there was a segment of the work that I was doing that brought me like enormous fulfillment. And that was working with people one-on-one or small teams for an extended period of time because I could see the transformation, not just in their work performance, but also personally making big decisions to honor themselves or get closer to becoming the promise they're intended to be. And so when I saw that, it was like, okay, I need to do more of that all the time. And working these jobs, the company's not, they didn't need me to do that for them. So it wasn't going to be a good business decision for them. So I just decided I'm going to have to figure that out. Now, an interesting thing in this, I share this because I think it was a hugely valuable insight for me. When I was talking to friends about launching my business, they were like, well, what are you going to do? And so I was trying to describe it, right? Like, I'm going to do coaching and consulting and help people with problem solving, fact-based problem solving, blah, blah, blah. And then what's the biggest hurdle? I was like, well, I don't have any clients. Like, I don't have any success stories to, like, entice people about. And one friend, she said, but Jesse, you're basically going to be doing what you've been doing for the past 6 years. I said, oh.
But get paid more money.
Have case. And get paid more money, exactly. And so I said, okay, I saved up 18 months worth of cash to cover my life expenses, my living expenses. And I gave myself 18 months to figure out how to start a business. And so far, I'm not dancing for money yet. So I think things are going pretty good.
Well, the club is very happy. Anyway, you're not dancing for money. Now, still, how did you get your first customer?
Oh, man. You know, another one of those things that I think us human beings, we have a bucket or buckets and buckets and buckets of value that we are blind to, right? One of those is transferable knowledge. The other is relationships. And so when I quit my job to start my business, I had breakfast with some friends that I had worked with previously. And they were telling me about a leadership retreat that they were going to be having at some fancy winery in Texas. And, you know, we're talking about it. I'm like, man, I don't know anybody that does that sort of thing. They needed a facilitator. And one of the guys said, dummy, we want you to be the facilitator. And I said, oh, okay, sure. So that's how I landed my very first paid gig. Shortly thereafter, I'd say within 60 days, another friend of mine who lives in Dallas, she had referred somebody, a decision maker with a big organization, to me because they were looking to do some organizational transformation. But what they wanted to do was they wanted to work with their VPs, department heads, et cetera, and the field out on the job site. And so what they wanted was one person or one source for that effort. And I've played in both of those worlds through my career. So she recommended me, and we, over the course of a few weeks and a bunch of calls, I submitted a proposal, and they gave me the job.
So are you a solo person entity?
Correct.
Or okay. So you don't have, do you have
Yep.
assistants or anyone working with you?
No. I mean, I have a podcast, the Learnings and Missteps podcast, and my editor, I finally had to hire an editor that do the editing of the videos and all the stuff. And so I work with him on a, we'll say, contract basis. So that's the closest I have to having an employee.
Okay. And how many clients do you currently have, if you don't mind?
Oh, right now I've got 5 active clients, and I've got a few prospects that we're working through what service or how I can best serve them. The fortunate thing is the active clients I have are making long-term investments in what it is they're working to accomplish. So that creates a situation where I'm not constantly chasing work.
How do you measure success?
There's 2 things I use to measure. One is light bulbs. And when I say light bulbs, when I'm doing my training or facilitation, problem solving, all that wonderful stuff, when I can see that I've connected with somebody, connected the concept or the idea or the solution in such a way that they get it and they're ready to take action in it, I could see it in their face or on their eyes, in their posture even. That for me is a success signal because I know I've impacted that person in such a way that they're going to begin operating differently. The The second is kind of a long tail and requires a lot of discipline for me, is actually seeing the business impact of the efforts my clients have embarked upon. Because it's one of the lagging indicators. But before that, what happens is the quality of life of the individuals I'm working with and their teams increases, which doesn't show up on a P&L statement. So that's not really measurable except for the light bulbs. And then after, a period of time and things start working out and things smooth out, then you could see the business impact. And so that's the other feather in my hat.
What's a typical time period? So let's say I start working with you before I can see some tangible results.
Oh, my goodness. So by tangible, I'm going to assume you're talking about like financial results.
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
If that was the goal when they came to you.
Yeah. So that's a difficult question to answer because there's a lot of variation in the type of work that I do. But I'll give one simple, basic example, and then I'll give another kind of bigger, the sexier one that people really love. One of the examples I have is the team was asking to learn a particular system that we use. It's a collaborative planning system that we use in construction. They wanted their field staff to learn what that system was and start applying elements of the system. And so that takes we can make that happen in about 2 to 3 weeks if we're super, 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 super focused. Another example similar to that is when we're looking to improve or redesign the installation of stuff. And in those cases, we can see the production improvement within 2 days of studying it, deploying some countermeasures or improvement ideas to it, and then measuring the impact of that. That can happen in 2 days. What's not sexy about that is those improvements are usually micro improvements that are only improving a process by, we'll say, anywhere from 10 to 60 minutes. But the compounding gains of those, of a 10-minute improvement on an activity that happens 4 times an hour, 5 times a week, 52 weeks a year, 3 years out of 10 is ginormous. And then the longer tail ones, when they're going for like a cultural transformation, I think of phases. So phase 1 is like, how do we eliminate the stinky work that everybody hates, that is just burdensome and unnecessary, over-processing junk? That can happen. I mean, I've had it happen within 8 months. The next phase of that is like, okay, now how do we adjust or calibrate the mindset of the executives and the decision makers so that they understand how they're contributing to the current performance and what they need to do to achieve the outcome that they're seeking. And that I've never been able to see that happen in less than a year. And I credit that mostly to the enormous amount of workload that our executives, decision makers, I mean, hell, everybody has on their plate. So trying to change and learn is difficult when you're stressed to the gills with mountains and mountains of work.
Well, I've always found that, and we only have 30 seconds left. I've always found the biggest thing is if you want to change something, right, and you're working so hard to keep your business afloat and at a certain level, it's hard to make that change because you're focusing on getting that work done, getting that next job done,
yes,
and or signing up that next client, right? So I've always discovered that. We're going to be taking a quick break. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. We'll be right back. Welcome. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. What we love about this station is like no other station in the world. It is like no other station in the world. We have a weird group of personalities here, don't we?
I mean, maybe you, yeah. Everybody else here is pretty normal.
Like, that's
define
one word
normal.
For it, or,
what is normal?
Or one word for one of us. I guess we'll say that.
Yeah, don't be calling us weird.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you who's not weird, and that's our guest. And so I would love to jump in. You kind of really shared some some specifics about your entrepreneurial journey, but I know that everybody's pathway to running a successful and profitable business absolutely has some hurdles and some challenges. So share with us a couple that you've experienced, and then more importantly, once you experienced them, how did you overcome them?
Yes, thank you. So one of them, I anticipated and I thought I had like measures in place to deal with it. And then I didn't. And so that one was like overloading myself to the point where I would be underserving my client or missing the target in terms of the quality of experience I wanted to deliver. And you coming up as a plumber, we used to get terrible work with terrible clients, and we did it forever and ever, and it was very difficult for us as the installers, and somebody in the ivory tower was continuing to chase work. And so I said, I don't want to repeat that. But right in the first 8 to 9 months, I found myself, because if anybody knows, you start a business, you're everything, right? I had to draft all the proposals. I had to do the business development, produce it. I had to learn how to put proposals together, learn how to do invoices, like all of the back of house stuff that I never, ever had to do. And I was getting a lot of work. I was getting a lot of gigs. And I found myself back into working in crisis and stress mode. And so I didn't. Now, the risk is if I say no to a client, I might never have them back, right? And typically the engagements for me start at about, we'll say 60 days up to 2 years, depending on what kind of investment they're looking to make or what kind of transformation they're going after. And so telling a client no is a scary, intimidating thing, and it takes huge discipline. So I got to the point where I was at my limits and kind of just not doing anything to the quality that I wanted to do it. And I said, I need a different system. So what I did, and it's worked out extremely well, is I drafted out a tiered pricing system. And so basically, first tier pricing was if I had 0 to, let's just say, 40 hours of contact time committed to clients. If anywhere in the month it was between 0 and 40, the next proposal would be priced at that rate, which was the lowest rate. Once I had 40 hours booked contact time for the month, then I went up to tier 2 pricing, which was, say, a 40% increase. What that enabled me to do was speak with the client about the work, submit the proposal, and if the price was too high, we could have a conversation of, I understand, and if this number fits your budget, being the lower number, I can start that work, but I won't be able to start it until, let's say, December. And so it accomplished a couple things for me. One, I didn't have to tell them no. And two, it set the situation up for creating backlog. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I think it's great that you're talking about how you integrated your pricing structures. It's one of the things that I think entrepreneurs really, they don't have a lot of access to information around how people price their services and how they, especially in a service-based business. So can you talk a little bit more in detail about how you came up with the prices in this particular strategy, and even to the degree of like how you're factoring in your margins and things like that?
Oh, yeah. You're very gracious in the amount of credit you give me. So I'm just going to tell you straight up, when a lot of people in my world are very supportive of me, and I say that with extreme gratitude because for a large part of my life, I underserved myself. I underserved my community. I was a debit on my community. I have a book about that. But as I was on the path, chewing on the idea about starting my consulting business, several people asked me how I was going to do pricing and how I was going to charge. And I'm like, I remember the first number I threw out there was 100. I'm going to base my pricing at $187 an hour. And a friend asked me, like, man, that sounds like you did some major calculations on that. And how'd you come up with that number? And I said, well, I think there's a NWA song, like 187 on a blank, blank, blank. And that, like, seriously, the reason I picked that number is because it was the highest number I could say without getting embarrassed, because I was I came up as a tradesman. And so that number for me really, really made me uncomfortable, because the way I thought about money at the time was very, very different. Finally, I had one of my coaches who said, Jesse, and he'd known me for years, he's like, given the experience and the knowledge that you have and the way that you can connect with people, if you charge less than $400, like if you create your pricing on a factor of less than $400 an hour, you are underserving everybody else that can deliver at the level that you can deliver. And you're going to be broke, and you're going to be working like a madman. And I said, that's crazy, ridiculous money. That's a lot of money. Again, from my background and my perspective, that's huge amounts of money. So he challenged me to commit to put the first proposal together with a number as close to 400 per hour as I could. And I did. And I put the proposal together, and I also calculated a whole different pricing at the $187 an hour rate, because I was expecting the client to say, you're crazy, that's too damn expensive. And so I wanted to have that backup number, right? I submitted the proposal, and they said, okay, when do we start? And I said, oh, my goodness, this is a miracle.
We've got to take a quick break.
That's exciting.
We're going to be taking a quick break. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM, because our show could not happen without our sponsor. Hello, sponsor.
And we want to say thank you to LegalSteps.com. That's LegalStepz. That's with a Z.com. And maybe you've been thinking for months or years even, oh, you know what? One day I'm going to start my own business. Maybe you've got neighbors or friends, family in your ear like, you know what? You should really turn this into a business. You're really talented at this. You've got something that other people don't have. And you agree with them, as you should, but you don't know where to start. You're kind of stuck. And I get it. It can be kind of confusing. Like, where do you even begin? Start at LegalSteps.com. The courses are under $150, very affordable. I know everybody is obviously super tight. The wallets aren't stretching as much as they used to. But if this is your dream, this is your goal, this is what you've been talking about for so long, don't let $150 get in the way. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward. You can certainly afford this. Set aside the money if you need to. Make it happen for yourself. You can register a trademark, take a class on how to form an S corporation or how to form an LLC. I took the S corporation course a handful of months ago, and I'm not in the business to start my own business, but I wanted to see what I was dealing with, wanted to see how easy it was, and really it could not have been easier. I had about 2 hours on a Saturday morning, was able to work at my own pace. I didn't have to worry about somebody else's schedule. I could pause it, rewind it, the dog's barking, somebody's at the front door, the kid needs a snack. So I was able to do it at my own pace. I could take notes. And the one thing that I really thought was very cool is that it was like a screen in screen, picture in picture, if you will. So I could see the legal expert on my screen, and I could see what they were looking at. So I knew that I was doing the right thing, because if I'm being honest, sometimes some of the legalese can get a little confusing, and you want to make sure that you're doing it right, that you're filling out that form the proper way. So you could see what they were doing. Now, listen, if you get to the point where you're totally confused and totally lost, they will just do it for you. And those experts that I'm talking about, by the way, they have over 30 years experience. So you're dealing with people who know this backwards and forwards. You're in great hands. Go to LegalSteps.com, LegalStepz.com.
Wow, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Legal Steps. Thank you, Jen.
Indeed.
And you're back on the Ask Brien radio show, KHS 1220, 98.1 FM. Here we are. Is that quick enough?
I feel like that's the tax tag and title disclaimer of a car dealership commercial right there. But
don't even get me started with the political stuff.
Okay, so I'm going to pick up where we left off on this particular conversation around pricing, because I think it's so important to highlight the one thing that you said but you didn't say exactly, which is you were successful in being able to close that that price point at an extremely higher level than you were accustomed to, because you asked for that price. And so much of what happens with pricing has to do with confidence. Do you feel like that you were confident when you went into that, or that as a result of that, it gave you confidence to continue to ask for it? And then how did you do the next round of your proposals? Did you stay at that rate, or did you raise it?
Oh, I love it. So absolutely not. I was not confident. I was losing sleep over the call because I was expecting them to tell me to pound sand. And so when she said, okay, like, let's set the date, let's get started, I said, oh my goodness, what just happened? And so I went back to my mentor, hero, friend, and told him how it went. He's like, I told you, Jess. He's like, you can't see the value that you bring. He said, that was point A. Point B, he's like, you're still thinking about as if I'm charging you that rate, but you're not charging me that rate. You're charging an enterprise, a company, that rate. And your total dollar amount is smaller than their budget for coffee. And I said, oh, I never thought about it that way. And so that's what helped me. I started chewing on that idea because I've negotiated a bunch of deals I was involved in negotiating deals with consultants when I had like a real job, right? And the numbers they were big, big numbers. But the company was like, yeah, that works. You know, what are we going to get and how's it going to work? And sure, like, let's go. So I wasn't charging the human being that I was interacting with. I was charging the company, and the company spends more than that on coffee. Duh. Now, what helped me really lock in my confidence was the kind of the tiered system I was referring to earlier. I got to a point where I chose to submit some proposals at the tier 2 pricing, expecting people to say no, and then we would postpone the start until I could get them back to tier 1 pricing. And they didn't bat an eye. They said, okay, when can we start? Son of a gun. And that happened enough times to where I said, okay, that tier 1 pricing that I began with, that's no longer on the table. So my base rate has increased. I reset my base rate now that I've got some sand in my pocket after doing a few, and nobody's got a problem with it.
Since we're kind of having this great, very insightful conversation around pricing, which most people just aren't really willing to think through or talk about, I'm curious how do you approach, if you have an existing client and they're up for renewal, how do you tackle raising rates for an existing client, or do you just bring new clients in at a higher rate and grandfather your existing clients? How do you handle that?
Oh, man. Well, I may get in trouble, but they know I'm pretty transparent. So what I did, I heard this, or I heard it on some podcast. I can't even remember where, but it was like the Black Friday. That's what it was a reference to, using Black Friday as a touch point to communicate a sale or communicate a change in offerings or something. So when I raised my base rate for all the existing clients that I had at the time, I wasn't, like, anything that we had already penned and dealed, like locked in, I wasn't changing those prices, right? Even though it was carrying over into the new year. But I had to give them a heads up that my rates would be going up in the new year. And so what I did was silly. I sent an email and I titled it Black Friday Pricing Opportunity. And in the email, I said, I love you. Y'all are awesome. Love working with y'all. It's been amazing. I want to give you a heads up and the opportunity to lock in any work that you're anticipating with me for next year at this year's rates. Anything that doesn't get secured by the end of the year will be priced at the following rate below. And that was it. That's what I did. And I got some orders. We put some stuff on the books, and some said, awesome. So, like, we're not ready to make a commitment yet, but we are going to have something next year depending on XYZ. And it was, and I got to add this, the relationships I have with my clients, because of the connection and the amount of time that I get to spend with them, like before, like pre and post service, I think is what enables me to have those types of conversations. So if I didn't have those regular contact points with them, I'm sure it would have been a much different experience.
We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. Tracy, you had some more questions you wanted to ask?
Well, first I want to be sure that people have an opportunity to connect with you after the show. What is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
There are two places. If you're on the socials, LinkedIn is kind of where I live. And so if you search Jesse Depth Builder, you'll find me there. And my website, depthbuilder.com. Depth as in deep trust, deep commitment, and deep change.
I love that. Well, if you are listening to this episode and want to go back and re-listen to this content for any reason, we know that's not the way live radio works. That's why we repurpose this content into a podcast that you can grab at any time wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And of course, you want to search for the Ask Brien podcast. That's AskBrien, the podcast, and you'll be able to get all of these notes on pricing and entrepreneurial challenges and building and scaling business. And we thank you for being a great expert today. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, Peter.
Well, thank you very much, Trace. So you mentioned during the episode that you have a couple books that you've written. So tell us the names of each book and how people get a hold of it and what it's about.
Yes, I got you. So one book, the one I wrote solo, is titled Becoming the Promise You're Intended to Be. That book is specifically for anybody who is struggling with self-destructive behavior or addiction. It is my story because I am living proof that if you don't have to stay there. The second book is titled Lean in Love, 5S Love Letters. And it's kind of a tactical book of how to apply a lean tool to our relationships, almost systematizes relationship building, professional and personal and romantic even, but I am not a case study for that.
Wow, that was interesting. And how can people get these books?
Amazon. They're both available on Amazon. So, you can search it.
And do you have any current books that you're working on?
Oh, that's actually an unfair question. I do not enjoy the editing process of a book. It's the worst experience I can ever think of. And so there is a book in my head, but it currently doesn't have a purpose, nor does it have an audience. And so I'm hoping it stays that way so I don't have to write it. But when the proper signals start chirping, I may go ahead and put myself through that misery one last time.
Okay. What was the biggest challenge you had in your new business?
The biggest challenge that I had in my new business was getting past the fact that I didn't have the credentials, I didn't have the experience, I didn't have the clout to start a business. It was all in my head. That was my biggest challenge.
You said you have a podcast, right? What is the name of that
Yes,
podcast?
The podcast is the Learnings and Missteps podcast.
And that's available on all the major podcast companies, or is it limited somewhere, or what?
Yeah, no, it's available on all the stuff. I've also got a YouTube channel if you want to see my smiling face, and more importantly, the beautiful, enlightening faces of my guests, because I get to interview folks every week or so.
So the shoe is on the other foot. I'm asking questions now, and you get to ask your own questions. Wow. Now, it's not the biggest challenge, and you only have 50 seconds left. What's the biggest regret in starting this new business?
Oh, my goodness. The biggest regret is not calling and telling everyone I've ever met that I have started a business. Because every time somebody I know finds out, they're like, man, I didn't know, and I have somebody I can refer you to. And that's just 2.5 years later.
Well, we only have about 20 seconds left, but I did want to find out, is it limited just to the plumbing and construction business industry or others? And you only have about 10 seconds to answer that question.
Yep, no, it's open to everybody. I just been banging my head against the wall in the construction industry for 30 years now. So all the great stories I have are only construction related.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being our guest. And I don't know if I should call you Jesse or how your mom pronounces it, Jesus or Jesus. But thank you very much for being on our show. And you're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220, 98.1 FM. Over and out.